Check. That sounds like shit.
You've been a music journalist for how many years now?
15.
15.
Yeah.
And you started working at Minnesota Public Radio
8 years ago.
8 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, I started as like a blogger back when that was like a big thing to do.
Yeah.
And then worked at City Pages from 2008 to 2012. Mm-hmm. And been at the Current ever since.
Mm-hmm. And you do the local show.
Yes.
On the Current.
Yeah. So I started as a writer because that was my background at the Current. And then over time, I worked really closely with Dave Campbell, who was the host of the local show before. And he was always so encouraging and almost like coached me.
Yeah.
And got me comfortable being on air because I was terrified of the sound of my own voice and hated it and just would get so nervous anytime I had to record something. And it was almost like going to therapy with him. He just made me feel so comfortable and talked a lot about using my voice and how to sound more confident and really sound authentic, I guess. Coming back to work after having my baby, I struggled, as I'm sure a lot of people do, adapting back to being in a professional setting after being at home with her and just having my whole world flipped upside down. And I really struggled with, am I supposed to talk about this, or will that make me look weak, or is it actually feminist to talk about this? Because a lot of people go through this experience, and maybe if it's more visible, then there's more compassion about it. And I just went back and forth on that for months of, I'm so sleep deprived and I can barely remember anything. And kept just fucking up at work, and feeling terrible about it. But it was all totally understandable, right. With all the changes that were going on in my life. So yeah, I ended up talking to a coworker of mine, Cecilia, about it. And she was like, I think it is feminist to be open about that and share your experiences. But I think there's just still this worry in a professional setting, especially, that you're going to look incompetent just because you're a woman.
Well, because it's emotional, right? Because, the birth process and all of the things that go with that are incredibly emotional. And that's something that honestly doesn't really get discussed, that raw biological, your body is essentially hit by a truck. It takes you 3 years to recover fully.
That makes a lot of sense.
And not to mention the hormones. When I found out that you could have your placenta encapsulated to rebalance your hormones, I was like, I want to go dumpster dive at St. Mary's and get that shit back, because I was so fucking it's just such a drop. How's your vag? I'm just kidding.
Well,
it's how are you?
I feel I was just thinking about this because I had Eiley in August of 2018, and I went back to work around the holidays of that year. She was 11 weeks old, and I just handed her to a stranger and was like, I have to go to work. This is capitalism. It's messed up. But I was getting back into work in December, January, which is already a kind of crazy time, just with everything. And I don't remember any of it. I don't remember being at work. I don't remember who I had on my show for those couple of months. I was sleeping at most 3 hours in a row, and then she would wake up, and I was just so deliriously sleep deprived and stressed out and disoriented. And I think I just hit now, a year later, the point where I feel like I'm fully engaged in everything I'm doing that's not her. When I'm writing, I can actually focus completely on writing. When I'm at work, I'm totally focused on that, and I don't have this little just pull to I should be somewhere else and I should be thinking about something else. I just feel really creatively I'm waking up and I want to have a new project, and I'm really excited to have a new project. So I'm just kind of in the early drafting out of proposal stage of my next book.
Which is?
It's going to be about all the badass women that worked to build the rock scene in Minnesota, who don't really get credit in any of the existing texts.
Yeah.
But were so key in so many different ways. So I'm really focusing on there's a little bit of the 60s. Did you know the first all-women rock band in the country was in Minnesota?
No.
They came out of Fulda, Minnesota, which is this small town. I think it's kind of by Mankato. And they're called the Continental Coeds. And they're teenagers when they formed their band. Their dad bought them instruments and told them to be a band, so they did.
Wow.
And they hold this title. I think it was 1962 that they formed, so they are the first all-women rock band.
Yes.
And they have a couple 7-inches, and they're really great.
Are you going to talk to...
I want to. I need to find them.
How
the last time they were interviewed was in 2002, so I'm going to have to probably go to Fulda and ask around and see if I can find them. Maybe one of them will be on Facebook. I don't know.
So what kind of drove you to investigate these kind of untold stories of women that have, helped to build a scene with very little visibility, I guess?
I mean, that very point. I wrote my first book about the funk and soul and R&B scene in the Twin Cities from the 50s through the 70s, and I really just got so much out of that experience of talking to people that haven't been asked anything ever about their lives and their music, and realizing that there's so much undocumented. I think I reached a point pretty early on in my career where I realized we assume that everything is just online. You can Google it and find out information about anything in the world, but especially when it comes to local music, there's so much that's not documented. Entire catalogs of people's work that have been forgotten for a lot of reasons, because we live in a white patriarchal society that values the white men that contributed things most. So I kind of had a turning point around starting to work on that book where I was like, this is what I want to be doing. This is what I've gotten to a point in my career where people trust me to write books, so I'm going to use that opportunity to talk to people that aren't included in the other narratives.
Wow.
And this was just a story that I've been really passionate about for years. I've had a lot of women on my shows around Women's History Month, and I've gotten to talk to members of the Clams, who are this really great all-women rock band from the 80s. Tete Noir, which was an all-women really experimental, kind of avant, new wave punk with nursery rhymes woven in.
Did you look at the exhibit at First Avenue?
I did.
Did you feel like that was a fair representation of women?
Well, it's hard because so much of the impactful moments in that exhibit are just the artifacts that they have in their collection. So I was surprised that they didn't include any of the Vixen artifacts that they have. So Vixen they ended up being a hair metal band in the 80s and going out to LA and becoming part of the LA scene, but they were from St. Paul.
Oh.
I think they're the first all-women band from St. Paul. If you ask a historian, I guess that would be me now.
If you ask me, and I do say.
If you ask me. Self-proclaimed expert. And their roots go back to the early 70s, and they are just a really fascinating band. And when the lead singer Jan passed away in 2013, her family donated her collection to the History Center, so they have her leather bodices and her guitar and set lists, and they actually have a napkin that they got handed when they were playing in some rural bar in Minnesota that just said, "Can you please turn this down?"
Oh my God.
And none of that was in the exhibit, and I was a little surprised about that. But I do think, they just have acquired certain bands' memorabilia because they're notable, like Husker Du and the Replacements, and Prince, of course. So that's what you're going to come away, having the strongest feeling about.
What's changed for you in the last 8 years in doing this specific show? It's 3 hours? Is it 3 hours?
2 hours.
2 hour slot. All local music from all across the board, which obviously you're the most, well-informed person here to do that job. But what's changed for you?
I guess, so when I was a writer, I would choose one person a week to really get to know. and write an article and do an interview, and it was a lot more immersive in that way of just choosing that one person and really helping to like tell their story. Now it's so broad. I'm trying to just have as many people as possible and like literally squeezing in songs. Like I just want to fit as much as possible into the 2 hours. I try to talk as little as possible so that I can just get back to the music.
Yeah.
And even when I bring in someone for an interview, I try to keep it really concise or edit it down so that you're only hearing a little bit of it just to keep everything moving.
So anyone can just email you.
Yep.
Here's a song.
Yep. Yeah.
That's
we have
so
a form
cool.
on our website that we really do listen to everything that comes in.
Wow.
Even if we can't always respond to everybody because we get a lot. I counted up. So this is my 4th year doing at the helm of the local show.
Okay.
And I've, at the end of the year, I always do like a little tally of like how many submissions did we get and how many things did we get to play.
Yeah.
We get over 1,500 submissions every year.
Wow.
And I play over 600 songs in the course of a year. And I feel really proud about that. Like sometimes it's one time that you get played on the radio, and I get emails from people saying like, I had a party because we knew that you were going to play the song, and like my parents texted me and my friends were over and like we all hugged, and I'm just like, that is why
really
I
cool.
do my job.
Yes. Clearly there's a treasure trove of history in
Yes.
Minnesota that is just untouched, and I'm really glad that there's somebody that cares enough to do all of that work, because it's not all accessible. We're talking about 20, 30, 40 years ago. There's how do you even find articles? Are you going and looking at microfiche?
Yes. Which I always feel like I'm like hunting down a cold case.
Yeah.
Like I have to.
You kind of are.
It's yeah, that's true.
Who influenced this band for real? Who walked on their back?
It's super boring. It can take hours to find like one thing, but it's so exciting when you find something.
Yes.
I went through for my first book. I was interested in just figuring out like what were the venues that hosted Black artists in the '60s, because it's very, very hard to get booked. And I literally went through the community newspapers and looked for ads. And I did that for 3 years of newspapers. And just, oh my God, by the end I was just cross-eyed. But I found all these ads, and it had like the bands that I had interviewed, I was like, oh, there's the Amazers, and here's where they played. And like I literally had to do that to try to track down like who was welcoming to this kind of music back then.
So if we're going to zoom out on that, like, do you feel like journalism, media coverage of female artists, but particularly at live shows, has changed a lot in the last, even 3 years?
I mean, journalism has changed so much in the last... and when I basically feel like I got into it as it was starting to collapse. I feel like I'm just running across a crumbling bridge. There it goes.
You got microfiche, though.
Yes. I'll just be in the archives for the rest of my life.
You'll get glasses this big.
So I've just noticed that I feel like we've really whittled it down to like the same couple of voices talking about music. Mm-hmm. And I find that to be really frustrating sometimes, because I want to hear from more people.
Yeah.
I even, just this weekend at Best New Bands, I remember even 5 years ago, you would go and the whole photo pit would be crowded with people taking pictures, and there'd be tons of recaps of all the bands and play-by-plays of what happened and who performed, and even what I said on stage as an MC, which is, well, sometimes makes it in there somehow. But this year there wasn't this year there wasn't a single recap.
What?
Yeah, what's going on? Why doesn't anyone care?
That is really depressing. Cool.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh.
I think about this a lot. I'm like, oh.
You're like, no, this is my world. This is what I'm like. I have my own, this is a sinking ship.
Right.
Every day about what.
Well, the music industry is imploded as well. So.
It's just it's a shrug and a wish, as I like to say.
Right.
It's you can't control it. You can just keep going with that.
And that's
There's
good.
a lot more accountability, it seems like. You know, and that's perhaps the best thing to come out of the Trump era is that, like, people are like, holy shit, well, this Joker is going to fuck everything up, and now we got to just look at each other and try to fix this. So, like, it's ugly, you know, revolution is ugly, it's true. But, you know, it's hard work, and I feel like now that, like, the initial kind of, like, digging this shit out into the open as far as, like, you know, racism and misogyny and xenophobia and all the shit, all the hate, you know, we're all kind of re-engaging with each other in a new way that's really lovely. I think, you know,
I think so
even
too.
though it's, like, frustrating and nothing is fixed yet, and, you know, it's like tiny little bits, like for every shitty interaction that I have with a male, I have a great interaction with a male, and I do notice that my male colleagues are a lot more mindful, and have, like, offered, you know, their space, you know, as far as, like, sort of seeing something, saying something, which is the huge shift. You have a Facebook, well, I guess it's your Facebook page. It's what would that be called? Like a community page?
Yeah, it's like a networking group kind of thing.
Binders Full of Women, which you did start kind of before you started doing this research on like the women in Minnesota music. And that has kind of become its own thing.
Yes.
You want to talk about that a little bit more?
Sure. Yeah, it's, you know, I started it because I was angry about something I had read about a band that happened to be all women. And I was really fed up with this idea that women are a novelty in music.
Yep.
That every time one emerges that it's like...
Who'd she blow?
Well, there's that. But just that it's like something to be marveled at, that a woman even had the audacity to get on stage and hold a guitar.
Yeah.
And I just find that mentality to be so defeating, and also it erases the huge community of women that are making music. So that was kind of the thought for me, and I just created this group, and I was part of a similar group for writers, and it was really positive. So I was like, what if I did that for the women that I know in music? And I went through my friend list, and I invited, like, whatever, the 100 women that I had, just like before I got tired. I think I made it to like J in the alphabet or something. And I was like, invite who you want. Like, this is just, you do the rest.
What the fuck is with Facebook and not having that figured out?
Oh, it's so awful to try to invite people to stuff. But anyway, so I just kind of on a whim one night was like, I'm doing this. I just want a space where I can talk to other women that are doing all various roles in the community, whether it's artists or bookers or photographers or other
So
writers.
this is everybody.
Media people. Yeah, just anyone that's involved in the scene. And I just almost wanted to do like a roll call, you know, like let's just like look at each other and see what happens.
Well, we talked about doing like having a big party for
which
like
I still want to do.
all of the people that work in the scene, no matter what. Like if you're a booker, if you're in a band, if you're, you know, trying to become management, or if you want to like do assistant work, having a get together where it's like just connect.
Yeah, no pressure to do anything.
No.
Just what happens if we all see each other.
No.
That was really the only thought in my mind. And then I woke up the next day and there were 800 members. And then by the weekend, there were like 1,200 members.
Wow.
And that alone was like mission accomplished. Like, I don't need this page to do anything else. Like, that is so cool.
Yeah.
That was a higher number than I expected. And people were taking turns just introducing themselves to the group. And it was just so amazing to see, like, how many different roles people were playing and how many women there were.
Yeah. Binders.
Yes, binders full of them.
Binders and binders
I have
and binders. Literally. That's a very appropriate name. Yeah. You're like, I was thinking like it would be like a binder like this.
A
Turns out it's
folder,
a fucking trapper keeper somehow. It's like,
and they have opinions, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, those women are so fucking emotional.
There's been some things that have risen organically out of it. Like Holly Hansen has led some sound workshops that are like
That's awesome.
only for women and non-binary artists, so that she can create a space where it's really safe for people to ask like what they think are like the dumb questions. Because I don't know, you could tell me, but I think 95% of sound guys in venues are still men, and it can be really intimidating. And she's really trying to break down that vibe.
Yeah.
And and then there's been, people that have stepped up and shared their stories. And that's the part that that feels like a responsibility that I haven't quite figured out how to manage.
People are sharing their stories about assault.
Abuse.
Abuse.
Yeah. And it certainly wasn't what I envisioned when I created the space, but it's obviously so needed that I've really done whatever I can to keep that space safe for them. And that's kind of,
Have you felt safe
in that space?
Just being kind of the face of...
Oh, no, it's turned into something I didn't really imagine. I think because it's a closed group, now there's just this, like, belief that it's this, like, secret place women get together to, like, hate on men. And that feels really dispiriting, because that's definitely not what it is. And I don't know, I've tried to have conversations with a bunch of different guys in the community that are either concerned about it or freaked out about it or just want to know more, and I've tried to walk that line with them of like, I'm not going to like let you in and show it to you, but you just need to believe that this is necessary, that this is how this community gets stronger, is by people who are kept on the margins, by having them allowed to see each other and connect with each other. Like there's something really powerful about that. So I don't know. I kind of am at this point in my career where like I feel like I've established myself, and I started out so hungry and I just wanted to just be heard, and now I have been heard, and now I'm like, what can I do with this position that I'm in that's good? It's just completely flipped what my goals are.
I mean, clearly you're using your platform for good in many ways.
I hope
you
so.
are. You are. Like everything you're saying is so like, it's so generous. And it really, like, you don't have to do any of that shit. You don't have to give a fuck. You don't have to have a Facebook page. You don't have to like check it. Right. I don't. I hate Facebook.
What's that like? Tell me.
When you're mindful about doing something because you do think it's going to benefit other people, like, and you mean that, like, it comes from a real place, that's like where the real positive growth happens.
Yeah.
And, I think about kids that are playing music, legitimate children that are playing in bands like Loki's Polly, who are just, they have this really amazing level of confidence that I did not have for the majority of my career. And I started performing for people when I was 14 years old, and I didn't have that. I was terrified. And it was like my terror and my anxiety was constantly, it was like I felt like I don't know how I continued at a certain point because it was so just like disheartening a lot. And these girls are just getting like, yep, do it. Here's free studio time. Here's a show. Here's the, send it into the current.
Yeah.
They're going to give you radio time.
They've been in the studio.
They've been in the studio. Yes. But I just love that
Totally.
All of these things, accumulate into basically laying out a better foundation for these younger kids.
Absolutely.
To grow up in a healthier environment where they're not constantly, objectified or feeling unsafe. Mm-hmm. And I do feel like that's something that, it is our job, as women in the community to help out those people out.
I think so,
because
too.
Why would you ever want that? I wouldn't wish that upon anybody, to have somebody be inappropriate with them or make them feel in any way that they're doing them a big favor.
Right.
Because I feel like that was really a lot of the attitude that I experienced from older men that were booking me, just slimy. Mm-hmm. You don't want that. And I feel like here, it's there's so many women that book clubs, like Diane. I so. Yes, but it's just what would that have been like? That, I imagine little me and having those kind of opportunities. I'm like, holy shit, I'm grateful for what I have. And honestly, I had some really awesome, older white punk dudes that were the ones that were keep doing it. I was oh. And they were like, oh, come on, you can open for this thrash metal band. It'd be great. You are leaving a legacy. Oh, jeez. At 36.
Time for me to
bow out. You're I'm going to retire and work on my book that's going to be...
Doesn't that sound fun?
A Trapper Keeper from Hell! So anyway...
Just picturing this giant Trapper Keeper a bat flying
well,
out.
I finished my book about women in Minnesota history. Chapter 1, the Clams. What's your ETA for the book? Do you have a goal?
By the end of next year, I'd like to have it out, which is pretty ambitious, so we'll see how that plays out. But my huge vision for it is that I want to have a book and a podcast and a big launch party.
Ooh, a podcast
about each of the bands, so you can hear the music. Yeah, because that was the biggest piece of feedback I got from my first book. People are like, I love how you write about these stories and how you describe the music, but I just want to hear the music. Right. I wish your book had a play button. So I really want to have a companion, some kind of listening experience to go along with it. And then my grand vision is have a backing band of young modern women artists that are in the rock scene, playing as the house band as we bring out these legends and let them just crush it one after another. That's my goal.
Yes.
Tiny goal.
Yeah. Should be fine. I'll just make it all slap
problem.
together.
No problem. You'll be sleeping for 5 hours a night by then.
Yeah.
You can do it.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. And as you were saying, podcasting, I'm oh my God, you could do an audio book and have that shit in there too if you wanted.
Totally.
But that's even better to do a podcast. So it's you can kind of group maybe, or have more than one song of a band, kind of talk about their history. Do you imagine that just being small kind of contained episodes, or would it be an hour long?
I don't know about length, but I've been thinking the book, similar to my first book. That's so fun to say. In my first book, and now I'm working on my second book. I really focused on the larger narrative of here's a 30-year history, including social and political dynamics, including, the construction of 94 through the Rondo neighborhood and racist club practices. And here's the story of what it took to be a black musician in this era when they were very much not invited to the party.
Yeah.
So I imagine that the book, this book will have similar elements of going into, the social context and political context and helping people understand that who weren't alive for it. And the podcast, I think, could really just more focus on the artists. Here is, tenor.
Yeah.
Like, you need to know this band, and here's why, and here's
Yeah.
what they sounded like, and here's some of their stories. And
Yeah.
I think it's going to be really fun
I
to
love that idea.
have that kind of all roll out. So, yeah, it'll be, I mean, I'm going to be working on it for the next 2 years at least. So
Oh my God.
I actually had that thought the other day, like,
Hopper.
can't wait to mail a copy to Jessica.
Dude.
I hope she likes it.
Did you read the first
Collection of criticism by a living female rock critic?
yes,
Yes.
that one.
Epic.
Like the Jessica Hopper book. It was really good.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing that stood out to me, I actually think about it a lot, is the whole record. Live Through This.
Oh, yeah.
Talking about Courtney Love.
Yep.
That is so fucked up. Like, and I participated in that. I was a huge Nirvana fan and a huge Hole fan, but I totally said, Kurt Cobain wrote this record. Oh, Kurt Cobain wrote it. Oh, she's just like this slutty, drugged out, whatever, and he's the one that's the band, and he's the one doing all the work. I totally bought that. And I read that, and it shattered me. I was like, oh my God, that woman.
Went through so much.
She went through so much.
Yeah.
She was totally fucking, like, brutalized by the media. And she just, I mean, she was a fucking child.
I know.
I mean, really, they were what, like 23, 24 years old when everything was crazy, and she's trying to have her own career. She's super fucking talented. She's an amazing singer.
Yeah.
She's got really great melody, and it was just like, nope. You don't get credit. Nope.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's another reason it's so important to look at the history.
Yes.
We have to rewrite it.
Oh my God. So I thought about that today, and I was like, I totally have participated in that, and that's exactly why we are where we are, you
Right.
know, where you're like, oh shit. Like,
Yeah.
everybody's had this.
Yeah.
Everyone has got it wrong all these years.
It's hard to, like, root out your own sexism and racism and just, like, prejudices that are just baked into your psyche because of living in this country and this time. And yeah, that's honestly, like, I think that's some of the hardest work that people have to do, and people are unwilling to go there, and that's why it's so hard to change everything. But I'm glad that we're getting into the muddy water and splashing around.
Exactly.
Trying to do something.
Exactly. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
And
That's a wrap!
that's a wrap. That's a wrap.
Your argument.
Get some B-roll.
You know I want to rhyme that with
B-hole.